Greetings, everyone. Thanks for coming out on a snowy holiday night for something we hope will be very special. How many people in here have used the New York Times Virtual Reality app?
Thank you.
That's wonderful. It's not every day that you get to have a chance to be with people who are right at the cutting edge of something as it's being developed. And that's the situation we have tonight. I know a lot of us aspire to go viral, right? And these are the people who can show us and tell us how to do that. My name's Ted Boghossian. I'm a visiting professor at the Kogut Center for the Humanities. This semester I'm teaching a course on iPhone filmmaking with 3D and 4K comparisons. Some of my students from last semester are here. Thank you for coming. Some from this semester are here. Thank you too for coming. And what we're trying to do is embrace technological change to show that the mobile devices we have in our pocket are now virtually movie studios. So you can shoot and cut and distribute right out of your pocket a feature film, a commercial, a documentary, whatever genre you want to produce. So tonight, our medium is virtual reality, so-called, and our guests, Sydney Levin and Michael Villasenor, are going to talk to you about what virtual reality means and how the Times is putting it into practice. So let me introduce Sydney first. She's in the center. She became the executive producer of the New York Times T-Brand studio 6 months ago after serving as head of homepage video programming at AOL, where she grew the video consumption from 50,000 unique viewers a day to 10 million every day. Thanks to her leadership, AOL became the #2 video platform worldwide. How many of you get your video from AOL? Not so many. That's why she moved on.
That's why.
During her tenure, AOL also increased time spent on the site by revamping and repackaging article pages and establishing best video and editorial practices. Sid, as she is professionally known and known to you tonight in the Q&A which will follow, graduated from the Boston University College of Communications. In just 3 years, she earned her Bachelor of Science degree. She was a magazine and journalism major and an English minor. She's also had positions at Hearst magazines, including Esquire, and became a writer for the Huffington Post after joining AOL. So she's somebody that a lot of you can be 10 years from now, if you're lucky and work hard. And her colleague, Michael Villasenor, is the creative director of ad innovation and marketing at the New York Times, where he primarily focuses on new technology and how to design effective user experiences for the advertisers within it. He graduated from the University of California at San Francisco, where he majored in politics, and he expects to receive his MS, or do you already have your MS in information architecture? Well, let's say it's in the works, from the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago this year. Along the way, Michael earned while he learned, helping nonprofits with their web presence, starting up some small web-based companies, and ultimately he rose to creative design manager at Flyte, F-L-I-T-E, a San Francisco company whose platform, quote, gives professionals the power to design virtually stunning ads on live interactive canvases while giving marketers the ability to launch, manage, measure, and optimize digital ad campaigns in real time at scale, all in one seamless experience. So he'll break that down so it's more palatable for all of us, because I know I don't exactly understand it. 13 months ago, he became creative director of the New York Times Magazine ad department, where he works alongside the publisher and newsroom team to ensure that all of us properly have our, so that he properly supports all of the marketing needs of the publisher in the newsroom. And this includes developing original digital and print ad materials and content in order to secure never been done before treatments within the marketplace, like the ones you see in the gallery at NYTVR. For all of you who will be surreptitiously using your mobile devices throughout the presentation, you can sneakily follow Michael at Paco Taco Mike on Twitter and Instagram. So Michael, please join us.
All right. Well, I have to say it's a pleasure to be here. Whoa, this moves. Today's been inspiring. I think that's the one word to use. Both Sid and I have talked in between each opportunity to have met not only students at Brown, but just walking between the campus, experiencing is it the virtual reality lab? I'm not sure what it's actually called.
The Yurt?
Yes. You're studying at a place of a lot of privilege. I think that the kind of exposure you're having to new forms of multimedia, new forms of storytelling, as we talked about, you're like, well, it's Brown, of course Brown would have this, is not only reassuring to myself and Sid as people who are attempting to take a stab at what we believe is a new form of storytelling. It's reassuring in that, but it's also, in a lot of ways, empowering. I want to learn more about what you guys are doing. I think we saw a great representation of a piece of art today that was using, I guess it was canvas. It's this, I don't know, it's certainly stuff that we're going to be taking back to the New York Times, and I really hope to expand on and build these relationships. I think it's just, there's no other way to say it other than inspiring. Anyway, that was off the cuff. Let's go back to this. NYTVR. Apart from saying thank you to Ted for bringing us up here, our visit to Brown is very significant. Obviously, it's very, very much an opportunity for us to share learnings that we've had at the Times and learnings that you guys have had here at Brown. In addition, Brown's commitment to new media formats, both in teaching but also in practice, given the labs, validates our larger effort, as I've mentioned before. What I do, what Sid does, and I believe a lot of us do already, is work in spaces which may have not been created 6 months, 12 months ago. I could have not anticipated working alongside great talent, great editors such as whether it's Jake Silverstein of the magazine or Dean Baquet of the newsroom, to understand what is the new form of multimedia storytelling. And in that, I think that there's this fun frontier we're embarking on. I think that we're at a place right now where everything is being questioned, especially, and I'll get into this in a bit, as publishers are becoming more scrappy as to find new audiences and find out ways to captivate you as you want to experience what it is to perhaps stand alongside people who have been displaced from their place of origin, or in the way of an advertiser, understand what it's like to see GE bring to life how nature inspires technology. But before we start all that, I just want to show a really quick sizzle. This is something that Sydney's team's put together in order to kind of show very quickly what we've done with VR. We're 3 months in. That's crazy, the amount of stuff that's already come out of what I believe to be 6 months ago, a year ago, a group of us who had no friggin' clue what VR was going to be at the New York Times. It's come together in large part because of just the amount of energy, the want to create a new experience. My job at the New York Times is to create that experience. It's really to sit in a room and understand, how do we take apart something How do we package it for an advertiser or for product or newsroom so that it's usable? It's a user experience. My job is to really create the framework of which a story can be funneled through. It's a good way to put it, Michael. Very well done. Finding new homes for content. We need to find new models. As you use, hell, it can be Zillow to find an apartment or a house, or Tinder to find something to do, I guess. We need to take in these aesthetics, these qualities of life you feel comfortable interacting with, and apply those to news. Why not? Or rather challenge it. Quartz released a new app the other day. It was inspiring. It's chat-based. It's Quartz talking to you. Can't vouch for Quartz's content, but the user experience is phenomenal. And we sat in a room and looked at it, and we tried to unpackage it, and we questioned our own and felt really insecure in a way, but also motivated to then say, why isn't the New York Times thinking this way? Or are we doing something different by way of the daily briefings in NYT Now that are creating a unique experience for our reader? Are we, I guess in a lot of ways, are we doing enough to ensure that you have a reason to open up our app every day? And that's apart from a push notification. Let's see, the next slide is on really this story building of how we got to where we are. And I know we're going to focus primarily on VR, but I think it's important to look back a bit. We're 165 years old. Brown, obviously, 100 years older than that. I think there's a level of mutual appreciation we could have for each other in that. How do we maintain relevancy? How do we ensure that we're embracing new technologies? And how are we, like Brown, as an institution, continuing to raise the bar? That keeps us important. The quality of education, the quality of content, these things are sustained. These things have always existed, and we've always felt really confident in that, but the model continues to change. And for about 155, let's say 105 years of our existence at the New York Times, we were fine, and I was supposed to pick up that paper. That's why I needed to get it. We've been publishing a paper, and that paper was consumed exactly the same way. Page one occurred, and page one is a meeting in which the editors sit in a room and decide what goes on that front page. It was a curated experience for all of our readers. That model stayed pretty much static, as was the opportunity for an advertiser to get placed alongside it, or I believe it was around $1,000. It's a lot of money for a yearly subscription for daily distribution. And we thought we were doing pretty good. In 1996, I want to say, there's probably a date on here. Yeah, 1996. We launched our website, and like any form of new media, we looked back in order to inform the future. This has ears. Those are the two boxes on top, very similar to what you see on a paper. Google did this with books when they first went into the book digitizing process. They basically wanted to recreate the art of flipping a page. Movies did this with plays. It was this idea, let's look back to inform the future. But with new technologies, that's just simply not enough. I think that when we did our first kind of jump into this, we did it in a way that I want to say was, not fully committed, but in a very cautious way. We had a digital segment. Actually, everything digital related to the New York Times was a separate organization of sorts. And that very much came crashing down in, I want to say it was around 2007, 2008, when the bottom got pulled out on advertising, and giants like AOL, Huffington Post, I guess AOL, BuzzFeed, Vice, all were able to understand how to create audiences around digital content. And it really required us to look internally. This is the big juncture point at the Times. This is the moment that everything shifted. And we constantly look back at this. It was not supposed to be leaked. It really wasn't. It was an internal report on the inner workings of the New York Times. They conducted the same sort of study or investigative study you would do to another publisher or, let's say, I don't want to say Watergate, but you get what I'm saying, an investigative study as to why we weren't necessarily winning. It's a scathing review, and if you have a chance to read it, it's actually quite interesting. It still holds a lot of ground. It leaked immediately the next day. It's really funny. We have the ability to keep secrets sometimes, but the Times, for some reason, internally, these communications get out to market very quickly, and it's on Gawker the next day. But it did point out a lot of our flaws around how we understood digital audiences. We were still looking at it as a paper. We were still looking at it as a static format, and the world had changed. We've gone in 20 years to a slew of ways to consume content. You don't even have to go to any of these locations. You can go to Facebook, you can go to Twitter. And this really, I think, had this incredible effect internally. And we've seen a ton of change even in my brief period at the Times. We actually invested in our magazine, which is on the far right there, which is interesting. We've created actually a new section in the paper for men's style. But with the watch, the iPhone, tablet, interactives, like how do we tell an interactive story? These things have all been evolved in the last 4 years, last 5 years, last 6 years in immense ways. But I think what I want to point out for the sake of today's conversation, our investment in the magazine. The magazine brought on a new editor from Texas Monthly, Jake Silverstein, somebody who is, I felt very cool with. He's also from the West Coast, and right away we connected, and I realized that the reason they brought him on was because he was okay with challenging norms. He was okay with asking whether the magazine had to exist in its current format, or could it be extended and interpreted in different ways by way of new technologies. Jake's a great guy, actually. He has this kind of a knack of making a joke of something, but at the same time has the ability, what he's actually saying is this real thing. He was like, why don't we get a helicopter above the Flatiron District and take a VR 360 film of the making of this wheat paste person. This actually existed. JR, the artist, came in and they, with wheat paste, put it in within a day and removed it promptly within a day because New York City was like, clean it up. But they captured this in video, in 360 video. And if you haven't had a chance to watch it, it's available both on the Invitee VR app, but also Verse. It was our first foray into 360 video. And Sid will clarify 360 versus VR. VR just sounds better. But it was certainly something worth investing in. And at this time, we realized by way of the Verse distribution that people were interested genuinely in how to craft a 360 video. But the video itself wasn't enough. Verses existed for a long time. 360 video exists. But how do you enable an audience of which maybe, I don't know, 45 plus, not really interested in plunking down $1,000 for an Oculus Rift? So Jake brought in cardboard. Now, this isn't the actual one. This is the one we got in the end. It's like a life-size massive one that you can fit a 4K TV into. But yeah, and this is me promoting my account. What was funny though is he brought it in. Kathy Ryan, the photo editor of the magazine, Andy Wright, my boss at the time, the publisher, and myself sat in a room, and Jake's kind of folding it, and he's like, "This is great. This is how we're going to get to empower a new audience with this form of storytelling." And Andy, the publisher, of course, rightfully so, said, well, how are we going to pay for that? That's expensive. That adds weight to the paper on Sunday. But first, we wanted to ensure that what we were doing would have the lowest barrier of entry. We wanted to ensure that when people received the cardboard, the video, and the app on a Sunday, that they could actually use it, that it wasn't too hard to embrace this next step in, let's say, storytelling. I want to say technology exists already or had existed, but this new way of the New York Times storytelling. So this is where we kind of start bridging the gap between our two roles. We had to find advertisers. We had to find a way to help fund this. Google, as excited as they were, had cardboard, and they said, well, no, we'll supply you with cardboard. This happened around at South by about a year ago. And they were like, well, we're going to give you 1.3 million cardboards. I'm like, whoa, that's great. But your current cardboard at the time doesn't fit nicely into a package. So they redesigned it, and they relaunched the cardboard at the time when we were going to distribute. We had exclusivity over that. Still costs money, though. It's about, I believe it was about 50 cents to $1 on each one of these packages, increased weight to get this to your doorstep. So GE said, well, we're really interested in new technology. We're really interested in doing things which no other advertiser does, and we never buy advertising from that anyway, but let's try this out. So GE comes in and says, we're going to help fund the distribution. But we also want a T-Brand Studio video, and Sid will talk about that more, an original video, to launch at the same time your stuff is launching. And then Mini Cooper also came in, another not traditional advertiser, who said they would pay for the promotion. So amongst these three moving parts, we had to figure out how do we keep everyone happy. Meanwhile, sending a reporter out to, whether it was Syria or, oh gosh, I'm blanking right now.
Ukraine.
Well, the Ukraine, thank you. And knowing that they're putting their lives in a lot of I want to say relative danger, but they're certainly not in a place of security. And using a device of which mimics more of a globe than a camera, that, alongside the fact that GE at any point could pull out, they're an advertiser. They don't have to pony up the money in the end if they're not stoked, which caused more stress for you than me. So what we had was a lot of captains on one ship. We also had internal politics. We were talking earlier about how many people played a role in this. At one point, the room ballooned. It seemed like everyone wanted a piece. Everyone wanted to just be in the room. We, from innovation to product, had to streamline it. So we actually cut people. I would love my whole team to be there, but it ended up being one person. We needed to make sure this was effective. We had 6 months to get it out the door. And we had to do that in a way that we had to keep all the pieces at play, but also not make sure, we want to make sure the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, not everyone knew about it, right? We want to make sure that it was under wraps. This was actually, and I'm speaking from my own experience, the most difficult part was how do you keep everything moving forward? How do you ensure that quality content's being created and do it under wraps? And I think that, and I'll pull the cover back a little bit, it leaked the week before it went live. Some little VR trade group got wind of what we were doing, and I think it was a salesperson or whatever, I'll give all the details. Ultimately, it leaked, and we freaked out. We're like, oh no, we're a week away from this big reveal. And we were lucky enough that they worked with us so that we could time everything at the same time. But we released it. And The Displaced was, I think, a monumental. It was at the moment, and I still think so. It was a testament to what we were able to do, and in a lot of ways, creating a new form of journalism. It's something that, like I said, had existed, but we did it and allowed, once again, 1.3 million people to embrace it. And there was this moment of calm that kind of set. As it went out, we had pushed a notification out to everyone's phone who had the app. The cardboards had started showing up, got reports of cardboards being missing, or that were missing. All of a sudden they're showing up on eBay. They're not worth anything, guys. Honestly, you can pick one up for $10. But we waited, and the reaction was huge. We saw users of all ages, families after dinner. We saw kids who actually enjoyed the GE film over The Displaced because it was not as scary. My job in commitment to the rest of the team on the product end and the technology end was largely done. We had finished it. And to see this sort of reaction, to see our readers writing in, and actually the app had gone out 2 days before the cardboard arrived at everyone's doorstep. And we had some dedicated readers who created their own makeshift cardboards out of wood and, I don't even know, goggles. But it was very much a sigh. It was very much we did it. Cardboards arrived, reactions are great. And before I turn this over to Sid, I want you to know that very much a learning process. We're still absorbing data. We brought in a slew of readers, committed fans of the Times. We also brought in people that we didn't necessarily know had ever read the Times. Maybe they were just coming in from Port Authority, who fell in love with their cardboard. But what was really interesting was that we had created this, and you'll talk about this, but this opportunity for empathy, this opportunity to connect at a deeper level with what was going on somewhere completely different from where you're at. So once again, new form of storytelling, once again, also a type of storytelling, not necessarily always the exact one, but an interesting project nonetheless. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sid, who's actually been a part of releasing 2 of the 10 films that are available on the app. Go from there.
Hey guys. So I'm Sydney Levin, the executive producer at T-Brand Studio. I'm in charge of all things linear video and VR related. First, just thanks to Ted, thanks to you guys. It's been a truly inspiring day. I think it's really easy for us to see VR as sort of a cottage industry, and every day we're trying to sell it, and it's our job, and it's really nice to see the things you guys are doing here and having fun with it. It really kind of reminds us how lucky we are to be doing what we're doing every day. So, it's an exciting time to be involved in video and VR, and according to Cisco, by 2019, 80% of all consumer internet traffic will be video. Now, Cisco doesn't make the distinction that it will be good video, and that's where you guys come in, and that's where T-Brand comes in. But I want to explain what T-Brand is. Everyone knows what the New York Times is, everyone knows what the magazine is, but there's this little part of the paper where we're actually doing all of our advertising, total separation of church and state, and we're the brand marketing unit of the Times. Advertising in layman's terms, but we're using the Times' proven recipe for storytelling to work with global brands to develop custom creative solutions. So in human speak, what that means is we do story mining. We're embedding ourselves with brands to figure out what's important to the brand, what are the ethos and the values that make them tick, what is the story behind the scenes that we might not know. Sometimes those stories are about the brands, other times the stories are kind of the inspiration. So a great example that I'll show you in a minute is Purina. Purina wanted to tell the story of shelter dogs, and essentially people think shelter dogs are less than or broken or something, and Purina wanted us to explain that it's really just dogs that have had a tough time. Their owners have died, or they've kind of had owners who moved essentially. So instead of going in there and really depressing people and showing stats and having like a little dog eating a Purina dinner, we found a family that had adopted a dog, and we told that story. And these are the stories that you guys hopefully want to watch. And as opposed to having sort of like a pre-roll typical advertising experience where your advertising part is the barrier to your entry of your story, we want our native ads to actually be the story. As I said, we're part of the New York Times, and that pushes us to work harder and smarter to make content that's Timesian in nature. And we developed the same approach to in-depth quality storytelling at the Times. As you heard Ted mention, I consider myself a journalist, even though I sort of sold my soul to the dark side, and everyone else at T-Brand is coming from the AP and Reuters. And we're really just trying to tell great, great stories and bring something to the world that people want to share and feel really good about after they've viewed it. We've created 100 content programs for over 70 brands in less than 2 years, so we don't sleep a lot. We believe that seeing is believing, so I'm going to play our sizzle reel. It's a solid 3 minutes because we wanted to show you everything, so please enjoy.
Där koma i byrgjum, nokkra saman. Næturnar þegar ég dofna upp, get ekki sofið.
Literally, we were told over and over it could not be done.
I get a real visceral, emotional excitement when I see something really beautiful.
It's that personal attention to detail that really helps differentiate us from any other experience out there.
It's not a buzzword, it's not a program, it's really what we do. It's everything we do.
The most incredible thing that's happened to me is that it is my version of a fairy tale.
A lot of love, a lot of dedication has been put into ensuring that your experience is everything you want it to be, as well as what we are proud of.
That's the difference between a good brand and a great brand.
It's a great sense of gratification at the end of the day that you got it done.
So that's what I do all day, just the video part. But basically, so why does what T-Brand's doing matter? Why does storytelling matter? And, the short answer is because everyone's trying to do it and it's not sticking. I don't know if you guys realize this, but every day, today included, you are seeing 5,000 pieces of advertising or brand marketing, but only 12 are making an impact. And that's a really bad margin. And this is a Mad Men throwback here, but sorry, Don Draper, traditional advertising isn't working, or at least it's not working in the way that it should. Native advertising, what I do and what we do at T-Brand, is on the rise, and it's on the rise for a reason. So what is native advertising? Have you guys heard this term? Some heads nodding. Native advertising is, and I'll just read this off, paid content that is created to fit the same format as a publisher's organic content, and it shows up in the same streams as your regular content. So you guys have probably seen it, and sometimes it's probably annoyed you. You might have clicked on a BuzzFeed list thinking that it's going to be some fun, like cats doing something, and it turns out it's an ad for somebody else. Essentially, since it's supposed to work in the organic environment as editorial content, it's really simple to kind of, stomp on that divide of church and state and to feel like, oh, I got tricked. And that's not what we're trying to do at T-Brand. As I said before, the goal is for our native advertisement to be the story. We're proud of the stories we're telling, so we clearly mark them. Why do I tell you guys this? And it's basically because to understand the unique approach to VR that is why you all came here, it's helpful to understand what's important to us as a studio and what our approach to linear video is, because it's one and the same with how we're doing our VR. So most importantly, we are authentic in everything that we do. Authenticity is a word I use 100 times a day. If the video at its heart isn't authentic, if it doesn't feel real, we'll lose not only the trust of the viewer in that moment, but all the shares that person could represent. And I know you guys are in classes and learning this, but people aren't just one click. Now they're sharing on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everywhere, and they're sending it to their parents, and you could lose downstream of like 10 or 15 potential different sets of eyes if you take off a user. So we're really sensitive to that. We also know the fine line between selling and storytelling. The audience is savvy. They'll sniff out fake stuff instantly. And if I was to go a step further here, you have to be your audience's #1 fan. If the goal is to trick your audience, that's just a bad experience, and you just are kind of a bad person. We also create docu-style videos at T-Brand that have real people, real stories. Emotion is key. I'm always asking the client, what emotion do you want the user to feel? How heavy-handed branding do you want this to be? And we hope that our advertisers are in this to win it. I can't believe I just said that. That's the cheesiest phrase. But basically, they should want to do native content. They shouldn't be coming to us saying, listen, can we sneak in this bowl of food or this call to action? And lastly, we avoid what I call the OIC moment, and I'm sure you guys have had this moment, and you've probably even had it today, but it's the moment when you're watching something that you're really digging, and then you realize that you're being sold something, and you kind of say, oh, I see, I get that. I never want that moment to happen, and it's the reason why I show my little sister and my husband, and I say, do you feel like we're getting the experience that we promised you? And if we are going to go heavily branded, which we sometimes will, it's right in the beginning of the video. You can choose if you want to continue, and that's super important to us. So, you say you want VR. I hope people in this room are old enough to know this incredible meme from Saved by the Bell. I don't know if you are, but basically, Michael set me up that everybody wanted VR. The cardboard came out, everyone's freaking out, they want VR, but they have no clue what it really is. And that's the fun part that I get to deal with, the fact that nobody knows what they want, and it's a lot of money and it's a lot of timeline. So VR, 360 video, AR, photogrammetry, we can't sell something we don't understand. We're only as good as our clients' understanding at T-Brand. It's not enough to have a great idea, you have to sell that idea. That's where the advertising part comes into this, even for people like me who maybe thought they were signing up just to tell stories. You have to tell stories on behalf of the brand. It's their money, you have to advocate for them. If your idea is not gonna sell, they're never going to come back a second time, and it will sell. I don't know if you guys saw the Goldman Sachs Innovation Report. It's really interesting. You should make a note and check it out if you're interested in all things VR, but venture capitalists put $2.5 billion into the VR industry. There's money to go around, and we're hoping, obviously, to capitalize on that. It also only took 48 hours for the Gear VR to sell out at $99, and that's a lot of money to invest. You can only imagine how many people are going to be involved in this when it's down to $10, $20. So basically, The client has to buy into the idea, and we have to be the ultimate translator to multiple parties. And this is what Michael was saying before. I know I keep saying VR, it's mostly because it's easier to say VR, but VR in 360 is a language unto itself, and understanding that vernacular is the first step to appreciating it, and as a platform, cashing in on it. Essentially, you need to be the type of translator you'd want for yourself. VR is hot, but to get it right, we have to be clear about what VR is and what VR isn't. Much of what we think of as virtual reality and what our clients call virtual reality is really not VR. True VR is a lot closer to a video game where you actively experience and influence your surroundings. You can get up and run to a door or kill an alien. You have some agency in those worlds. And by that definition, our NYT VR app isn't true VR. Instead, what we're building is best described as 360 video, and at work, I yell at anyone that says VR, but I'm going to give myself a pass because it's easier. Basically, when I think about 360 video and how I explain it to clients is that it's like a Disney ride. So you're on a Disney ride, you're on it's a small world, and you feel like you're going somewhere, but you can't actually control where you're going. Although in that moment, it's not top of your head that you're stuck in this experience. And some other vendors I've talked to have described it as like a ballerina in a box. So you can spin around, but you can't actually go anywhere. You can't jump or you can't move. You're on rails, and as a result, it's a passive experience. The pros don't consider 360 video true virtual reality, even though the media does. You can call it 360, you can call it passive VR. The work that's coming out in the Oculus, for example, and a lot of the stuff you guys are doing here is true active VR. And then, of course, to make this even more fun, there's AR, which overlays information over the physical world. We're not doing that yet. Maybe in 6 months we'll be back here doing that, considering the speed at which we do things at the times. But the difference is not trivial at all, especially if you guys want to get into advertising and have someone funding your creativity. It's important to understand the difference and be able to explain it to clients. And you can honestly just practice explaining it to a friend, and that kind of gives you the idea of what it's like to tell someone who has no clue about this world. And lastly, I just want to say that the ability to explain what we do is not just a technicality, it defines the terms of service, and it makes you as a salesperson or a creative strategist smarter about your craft. So being smarter also means being honest about when VR is the wrong experience. VR is a great way to tell a story, but it's not always the correct pick, which people don't always want to hear when they're in the room and they want this big fancy object, but we're not in the business of just selling someone something to sell it. The goal is that it's the right medium for the story. It's coming back to authenticity. If we do something that should have been a linear film as a VR film and the experience stinks, we're going to lose that person as a viewer of the VR app and potentially on the paper, and that's a big weight on our shoulders and one we take really, really seriously. I might be preaching the choir here because I know you guys are all pretty well versed in VR, but in traditional films, directors can play with the depth of field, they can edit, they can give you a sense of location. With Live Action 360, we have one camera in a fixed location, and we can't force the viewer to look in any one place. And as a result, you can't necessarily guarantee what they see or what they take away from that experience. Because the camera does so little work, the environment and what you're filming must do all the work. You're really relying on the environment and the person to draw the viewer in. So it's important that at the heart of what you're doing, you have a story. It can't just be snazzy, it can't just be something cool. Something that I normally do, and I won't do now because it's late, but I'll ask people to hold their hands up for 2 minutes. And when you're engaging in 360 video, it might be a passive film, but it's an active experience. And holding your hands up like this for 2 minutes is kind of a lot of work. I know that sounds silly, but it really is. What else in your life are you necessarily doing besides working out, where you're investing your body in it? So if the experience is boring, you're not going to spend that time doing this one half curl, essentially. So the way I tell people kind of the difference is that 360 video is a medium unto itself, and most videos that work in straight linear film won't translate to 360 film, and you shouldn't feel bad about that. If the experience isn't right for VR, don't do it in VR. And I'll say that sometimes in a client meeting, and it blows people's minds, but the goal here is the experience, and VR might not be the correct experience. So that was a little negative. Let's talk about when VR is the right way to tell the story. VR works when the story has presence, and I used to say in meetings, all passionately, that VR translates you to a place you couldn't go. It transports you, rather. And everyone's like, yeah, true. But then they come back to me and be like, well, I can't go to an office park in New Jersey, so let's go there. And I was like, oh, I have to work on my pitch here, because just because you can, go somewhere you wouldn't normally go doesn't mean that you'd want to go there. The way I refined it is that it adds a sense of presence, and the goal is to feel like the scene is happening around you, however basic or involved it is. VR also works as an empathy machine, and the distinction there is it's not a sympathy machine. The goal is to understand and share the feelings of another person. We don't want VR to be associated with only sadness or only happiness. It should work for every client, so just putting yourself in someone else's shoes is really important, and a great way to figure out if VR is going to actually be interesting. VR also works when proximity elevates the experience. The rig placement is really important. Just filming this room in VR or in regular video probably wouldn't be that interesting, but if we put the rig in the middle and had a bunch of celebrities in the audience, you'd look to your right and left and see like Leonardo DiCaprio or like Michael, and it would be so exciting. And that's different because normally you look to your right and your left and you wouldn't see those people, and that really adds to the experience, even if it's in a room that isn't that exciting. And lastly, VR works when it has a level of immediacy. Because of the way VR is happening around you, it can make pretty much any experience feel more urgent, and that can really help us a lot whether we're editorializing something or we're in the advertising world. So, lastly, what does VR leave behind? When pitching VR or 360 to a brand, you've got to think about what's left behind on the table, and this is something we were talking about before. The Displaced, as incredible as it was, doesn't tell you the backstory about these kids, doesn't tell you why they're in this situation, and if the goal of an advertiser is to tell a big brand story, that's probably not going to come through in a VR film, because we're not going to have these quick cuts, we're not going to have the B-roll, we're not going to zoom in on a photo that might really make a difference. So I think that the way to think about 360 video is that it's an experience, and we hope that experience equals a memory. So just kind of as a last bit, it's important to remember that to document a journey with many fleshed out details, docu-style is often better, and to document an experience, 360 can work nicely. So just to kind of sum up, VR is the future, we want to embrace it, but embracing VR can't come at the risk of making VR. And if what we've seen today is any indication, you guys are obviously doing amazing things, and we're really happy to be here. So thanks.
Thank you so much. So we'll move into the Q&A, and I'll start with a question or two myself. As a filmmaker, I'm wondering whether it's really not the size of the audience for these empathy projects, but the quality of the audience. So for example, at Davos, at the World Economic Forum, there was virtual reality this year, correct? Mm-hmm. And people were watching something like The Displaced. And it makes me think that if someone at a foundation or in a government or a nonprofit were moved to do something, that would be reason itself to create one of these extremely expensive projects. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that an interesting thing about VR is that since you are capturing the entire scene and you can't zoom in on it, oftentimes, news networks will kind of zoom in on a crowd maybe of like 10 or 15 people and say, oh my God, it's a mob out here, but it's really only 10 or 15 people. I see a lot of application for empathy or for the news in that you can't trick your viewers about what the story is. The full scene is in this view, so if it's only 10 people, it looks like 10 people, and I think that will be really helpful in telling true stories editorially, mm-hmm. and it would really work for philanthropic endeavors or at places like Davos where you want to tell a full story devoid of any bias essentially.
And so what are you finding statistically about the way people view it? Do they view it mostly on their home computer, on their phone, on their mobile device, on their through their cardboard?
It's still early. I think that we're still sifting through a lot of the data points that are coming back from us or to us. We'll take two examples. We had The Displaced, which launched on VR. It was promoted on the homepage. If you went, also the more recent one was the behind the scenes of the political circuit, let's say. Those were both promoted on the homepage in a certain format, of which very much was pushing people towards the app. If you look at the great performers, it was presented differently. Now, we're still very early on in understanding what is the most appropriate way to promote this content within the app, but also what is the most comfortable for someone to experience it. Very early, people do still use the 2D player, which is available on the site. I think it's a little inconclusive at this point as to where people are going. Also, capabilities is something to keep in mind. In the next year, we're expecting, hopefully, all the people who are still on iPhone 4s out there and iPhone 4Ss to upgrade, because there's a technical limitation there as well within the device that's being viewed on.
And do you have any statistics on what the mean number of times they're streamed is?
Do you?
So we can't talk about number of streams per film, but I can tell you that the average viewer is staying in the app for 14 minutes, which is mind-blowing. I mean, most companies are trying to get people to watch a video for 30 seconds. And what this is showing us is that people are discovering within the app and potentially discovering some of our branded content and really digging around. And that's exciting to us because it means that we could continue to load the app up without people feeling like we're overwhelming them. They're actually telling us, give us more, we'll figure out what we want, and we'll engage with it.
And it was also the #1 downloaded app for the Times at launch. It was the fastest downloaded app, I guess, is the way to phrase it, that we've launched, including our core app.
This would be a good time to tell you that there are some cardboards outside when you depart, so if you haven't experienced it or you want to experience it again, they're already pre-downloaded and you can watch some of the gallery outside when you leave. Let's talk about audio for a moment, because you're suggesting people wear earbuds, and how much does that really add to the experience?
Go ahead.
A lot. Audio is like 50% the experience, and we don't have binaural sound yet, which will really help us explain to the viewer where to look. And since there are no visual cues of, hey, look over here, hey, look over here, we use audio to direct your eye. And on a lot of the cameras, like the Ozo and the really fancy things, the audio part is the most important bit in the middle. So you can capture a story visually and audibly. Orally, rather.
Right.
The tricky thing for us is we don't have that binaural sound yet, so we're really just...
It's coming. It's coming soon.
That's exciting. Yeah. We're really just hoping you put the headphones in, put the biggest headphones on you can get.
Yeah.
Really the goal, like if you think about a Gear VR, is to immerse yourself in the experience, and the more you can kind of cut out the rest of the world, the more intriguing the...
you could watch even the Paris Visuals one, and if you have good headphones, and it could be the cardboard, it could be... another device, but very much puts you in the middle of what was like to stand in front of one of these vigils immediately after the attack.
Now, how quickly can you mobilize? If there was something that happened and you wanted to capture another vigil tomorrow?
Yeah, it largely depends still on the stitching process. The post-production process takes a while. Obviously, there's a lot of advancements in that every day. We can take the vigil, for example, and that's a 360 video to clarify. That's 2 to 3 days. I mean, it's a quick turnaround to get something to market after it's been filmed.
And are you finding a lot of companies now coming to you based on the success you've had so far and saying, we want to do something similar?
Sundance is a good example where we were able to feature Sundance films within the app. I didn't point this out, but it's also part of this larger strategy or conversation is, what role do we play? Do we just... Are we just displaying New York Times content? Is it advertiser New York Times content? Is it the best of VR content? Once again, very inconclusive. I think we're still trying to figure out exactly our space, and I'm sure there's plenty of people above me that are deciding this as we speak. But Sundance is a good example where we're able to curate some pieces that weren't necessarily created by our newsroom or T-Brand Studio and feature them within the app.
I wonder how long it'll be before there's a feature film, a narrative feature film shot in VR.
Yeah, I think it's largely, it comes back to the fatigue and how long you can manage to stay within that experience, whether you're holding it up or strapped to your head, as Sydney experienced today. Some people get dizzy.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly a big thing. It's awkward in these big client meetings with fancy clients for me to say, I hear you, I like your idea, but I do think you're going to throw up. And they look at me like I'm crazy, but that's a big barrier to entry. The goal of this experience is for it to be high quality, and when you're first person, I try to really discourage that. If you're looking down and seeing arms and legs that aren't yours, It's not like you hold this cardboard up and your brain's like, oh my God, I'm in another world. You still know you're there, so you should really be more of a fly on the wall than a first-person POV, and you also shouldn't do anything that your body couldn't normally. So yes, you can fly, but you should be flying kind of along a track so that your mind can anticipate where you're going, so that you don't throw off, your balance essentially. And you do have to do a number of the experiences, and even today, getting a little nauseous makes you realize, what you should try again and again. And I do think everyone should watch good VR and bad VR to realize that the nuance is there.
There's some really bad VR.
Yeah.
But it speaks to the infancy, the fact that that's, as we both pointed out, why it was so invigorating or inspiring to see the work you guys are doing here. This is a shared learning experience. This is brand new territory that we're all venturing on, and mobile device continues to reinvent itself. We've talked about this. We were talking about it today. Is that a device of which you thought would change in the last 2 years continues to get improved to the point that it's just increasing its capabilities and finding itself even more versatile.
Questions from the audience? Yes.
I think that's a great question, and that's why I introduced this by talking about native advertising before getting into VR. So the Times hasn't stopped, taking in regular ads. Regular advertising on TV and the radio isn't stopping. This is sort of just a different addition to advertising, native advertising. We are not trying to trick anyone. It says paid for and posted by. I don't work in the newsroom. I gave that dream up when I came into advertising land. We're just trying to tell stories that are, basically linked to a brand. And in my world, the goal is to just have the story come first. Now, there's plenty of native advertising shops that are more branded advertising, where the brand is at the heart. We're really just trying to tell a great story, and there's an advertiser behind it. So the distinction that we're making is that we're being very forthright with it. It's not in the paper. It's got its own section of the Times. But we are making content that's just as interesting and good as what the newsroom and the magazine is doing, but we don't ever want to have an overlap where you're confused. So if you go to the NYT VR app, you'll see clearly, noted paid for by Weinstein or paid for by GE. And I think it's just the fact that traditional ad isn't working, and rather than just giving up, we're trying to innovate on it. But we don't think we're the newsroom. We are all former journalists, but the difference here is that we're finding stories in a different place and telling a different type of story.
Sure. Let me also say that Procter & Gamble was one of the very first television producers because they were trying to sell their products, so they created soap operas. And in the same way, GE Theaters sponsored dramas on television in the 1950s. So if you take a long view, you begin to see how a lot of this is coming around using a different technology to the same idea. Just as public television uses companies promoting themselves at the beginning and the end of national productions or local productions, and now they're moving on in some local channels to actual commercials. So, it's in a way it's history repeating itself, but it's an excellent question.
Can I just
Yes.
one little thing, and this is what more specific to my team's role in relation to someone who consumes our content. It has to do with how do we ensure that ads aren't screaming for your attention when we're building out a UI. Too often we've seen, and I know it's off the topic of VR, but it's specifically the fact that the homepage could have a takeover. How do we avoid that? How do we make this more linear? How do we ensure that if you want to watch your video, you can just watch your video, and then alongside that stream, as Sydney had pointed out, there's an advertiser opportunity, but not one is blocking the other. Very similar to how you flip through a magazine.
Yes.
Can I set you up really quick?
Sure can.
I think that she's the gatekeeper. I think that because we have an extreme value in our readership, people pay money for it, other than NYT Now, or if you consume it through Facebook. And so because of this inherent tie to the newsroom and all those checks that have to occur before, let's say, Sydney creates something that goes to market, we can place a certain level of importance on that experience holistically for the reader. So I could leave that.
Yeah,
open.
that's a really great question. So we're not saying yes to every request that comes across, and a lot of the times that hard no is coming from me. We don't really want to do anything that's promoting, we never want something to come out and people say, oh, T-Brand votes for this person, or oh, T-Brand loves what this person's doing. And that can be hard, like even with GE. We don't necessarily believe in all the things GE is doing, but we're pushing our brands to let us tell a story that is often not even related to them at all. Amazon came to us, they wanted us to promote Transparent, for instance, and we thought they were going to want us to find 2 families with Transparents, but they really wanted us to just get to the core value of the show. So we went out, we found 2 amazing families, an Italian family and Jamaican family, and we told the story of them coming around the dinner table because that's what's important to Amazon. And for us, and I can't speak for all native advertising, but for us, we're just trying to tell a really great story that we feel good about. And great doesn't always mean really positive, or really smiley. It could be just, upsetting at times. But the brand is kind of like happy to be a part of a good experience. And typically they're just kind of tagged on the end as Amazon supports X or paid for and posted by GE. So we don't work things in subtly for the most part. I feel like we are, as a result, in a good place. Now, I can't speak for all VR. I'm sure that other places will, have things kind of like subliminal messaging, and who knows, maybe in the future we will too. But since we are under the umbrella of the Times and being Timesian is important to us, I feel like we take that incredibly seriously.
Yes.
I think that the tricky thing to explain, and I'm not sure I did it incredibly well, is just that we're looking to give you an experience that's similar to what would happen in editorial. So if you were in the lifestyle section of the Times, you might learn about, a family that's buying a house somewhere or how to make guacamole. We're really coming in and just trying to tell a story with a real arc, a beginning, a middle, and end, and that's why our videos are a little bit longer than most advertising videos. And then the video lives on a page with the advertiser at the top and the bottom. So again, since we're native, it's really the story first. A brand will come to us and say, this is important to me, this is what I stand for, and sometimes the brand is the story. So I didn't mention it, but like Olay, they have really amazing scientists behind the scenes that could be anywhere else. So we go there and we tell the story of these scientists. We don't say, this is the best cream ever. We let the scientists tell their story, and we do it docu-style. So I don't let the bosses be in the room. We don't give people the questions beforehand, and we just try to do the best we can to tell something that you want to watch. And if you don't want to watch it, you don't have to. It's not alongside the editorial.
We had another example, and I'm not necessarily on T-Brand Studio, but being close to this project when I first came on, was Google came in and said, we want to power 36 hours, which is a recurring column in the travel section. Says, hey, you're in Puerto Rico for 36 hours, check out these spots. As opposed to having Google run alongside it and power a map and basically Googlefy it. Whoa. They created a destination, a utility, apart from the column itself, where you could browse through the collection of all these places in the last year and save them to your maps. Now, it's additive. It's sure storytelling within a framework that clearly marks it as Google. But if the user is actually interested in seeing that utility and it actually provides a utility, it's a value. Netflix did that as well. Netflix came in and said, we want to tell the story of women's style in prison. And I remember the editors laughing, like, no, like, we're not going to do that. And this is T-Brand Studio, this is in the newsroom. And what they said was, give us some time, let's come up with a story of which may be more interesting to our readership if we're going to actually put that out there. And what they found was that the prison system was made for men. And women are living in there or living amongst this sort of broken system. And they interviewed them in personal one-on-one videos, and it's a really interesting piece. And just at the end, it has Orange is the New Black, paid for this, but it was actually a piece of content which was really interesting. And granted, in order to even get there, you'd have to commit to the fact that you're going to go into this paid opportunity. But the story actually proved to have its own legs. Yes. Do you want me to speak to that?
Yeah, you can
okay. It's kind of a standard video, you're pointing, right? And it would actually extend into even the storytelling. How do you guide a conversation when you're trying to create an editorial piece so that it's a conversation, you're trying to learn more, get the story out. Now you're putting a 360 camera and just running around the corner and hoping for the best. Lighting, sound, all those things. I think right now it's still very much a level of guesswork. When it comes to the newsroom, those quick turnarounds, the Paris Visuals is like that. They planted that amongst the candles and walked away. I think that the story is the part that we're still trying to figure out as to how do you craft something that is as much of an editorial piece and not necessarily just an empathy machine. And then also keep it true to the person who's speaking to the camera without you actually having the opportunity to guide that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've done CG work thus far. Both GE and Carol were, animated essentially, and that happens a lot when telling a brand story, just because often they're intangible stories. So we fall back on that, and we haven't done a live action piece in T-Brand yet, but I'm hoping that the right story comes across our threshold. And as MV was saying before, we are the ones making the recommendations about what the best film is. So if a brand comes to us and we feel funny about something or it just doesn't look right, we'll recommend the better version, and they look at us as, the reason they're here is for our guidance. So we're in a nice place, I think, that maybe not all branded destinations are, where we're able to have this freedom to say, listen, that's not a great idea, we feel good about X, or we'll just pass on it.
Yes.
So I can't speak to everything on the journalism side because I didn't compose the piece. I sat in the middle on the ad, or rather the product end. The findings, though, were that people were very moved, right? I think that when telling the story of displaced children, and let me know if I'm not answering the question correctly, but that to understand what it's like to be a child still and wanting to have fun, yet, and one of the lines is, I always wanted my school to get blown up, and now it is. But these kids they're still kids. And to experience that through that lens provides a lot of emotional impact. I think it's hard to, want to balance that. You want to make sure that it's not just him selling you on this emotion, that it's still also atmospheric enough for you to be able to make your own opinion as to whether it's something that you have empathy towards or not. I don't know if that accurately answers it, but I do think that there's this increased amount of variables that you're playing with in the storytelling. It's not just a linear format of, words.
Mm-hmm.
One or two more, please. Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it is worth clarifying. We had to open it up to advertisers in their current format, and this is just from the UX side of it, so that we would prevent. Okay, so top line, I wanted to make sure there was no banner ads and no pre-roll before your VR experience. The initiative was Newsroom and the magazine specifically, a venture of which Jake Silverstein and team said, hey, this is something we want to pursue. We've since opened it up. There's now newsroom pieces. Paris Visuals are a good example of that. But when we look at the advertiser content, it was built in a way so that they could live alongside it, but they didn't obstruct your opportunity to go in. And the VR app actually is open. It's not a paid app, and you can experience these films. Mm-hmm. So that was a very deliberate decision made in order to allow for advertisers to coexist, but they had to provide VR. They weren't, we've had people clients come in and say, well, I've got this 15-second clip. Can I just put it in there? I'm like, no. This is a premium opportunity. We're trying to create a new experience for people to consume editorial, magazine, whatever it is, content. What does that mean in this new framework when we're starting from the ground up as to where advertisers can live, but not necessarily obstruct your opportunity? And I think, at least for me, I get really pissed off when I have to watch a 15-second clip for a 1-minute cat video. Sorry.
And I think the majority of the films in the app right now are editorial and magazine.
Yes,
it's just that we're talking about the brand story part. I've only done 2, and the rest of the films are editorial and in nature. And I think we're pretty proud of the distinction we've made, because not every publisher makes it so easy, and it's top of our mind to make sure you know exactly what you're clicking on, which is more than I can say for other places I used to work, to be honest.
One more from a student, may I? Yes, in the back.
I think it's a mix of the 360 film and a mix of the fact that you're actually legally blind when you put the cardboard up to your eyes. The fact that you can't see anything else, you can't hear anything else. You know, empathy machine is a powerful term, but it's just also a way to be completely focused on your subject, whereas you might watch a similar video regularly on your desktop and have people yelling at you and have like your text going off. And I think that it's just a vehicle kind of physically to immerse you in a world and to make you stop for a second and to like actually look around. And often if we take a second to look around, even in a linear film and you're maybe at home, you would have that similar empathy there and feel like you're really in their shoes. But it's almost like a moment in time, honestly. And it's a little scary to me to think of people like sitting in their rooms with these things on their head, but it is, when done right, kind of a moment to focus on something. And I think that that's as big as what you're watching. To be honest, just that moment alone with this content, to just stop thinking about 50 billion other things and to focus in and to say, oh, actually, like I feel something. Whereas when you're watching a film, sometimes maybe at work, and you're not me and it's not your job, you're just rushing through it. So it is that moment, I think, alone that really helps.
Parting word?
Thank you for the opportunity. Obviously, you can reach out to either Sid or I. This is an evolving conversation. I think this is my intentions being just holistically looking at how we build new platforms to support new advertising or new forms of content or storytelling. I want to know from you. Feedback is critical to what we do and what I do. And if I work in a silo, it will likely fail. So thank you for the opportunity. Please reach out. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for coming. We hope this will be the first of many visits to Brown. And I just want to say that only 10 years ago, I was making linear films for the New York Times Television Network. So to imagine that we're here 10 years later talking about these kinds of films, I can't imagine where we'll be 10 years from now. But hopefully you'll be back to talk about those things. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.